I'm late, but it's the first week of this, so hang in there. Bear with me. I do have the dehumidifier running, because of my heart. It's having issues. So if the audio isn't fantastic, that's why. Hopefully I'll be able to fix it later. We'll see. I'm gonna put some light background music on. Maybe that'll balance things a little. I don't know. There we go. Hopefully that's not too loud. I can't really tell. I don't know. I'm kind of spacey because I woke up late. I had an appointment this morning, a telehealth appointment, and I had to like throw myself together to look presentable. And then I went straight from that to this, so I'm a mess today, but it's fine. It's fine. We'll get over it. Today, I wanted to bring back peer reviewed paranormal. That was something that I did at the end of last year when Sam and Colby everything blew up, and everyone really liked it. It did really well on the channel. People still ask me to bring it back. The problem with that is that I haven't found anything that was worth reviewing, if I'm completely honest. The Conjuring House series from Sam and Colby was one of the biggest that's ever hit, like YouTube, TikTok, all of that. And like everything after that is just, it's worse. It like and I'm not saying that the Conjuring House stuff was good, it was worse. So with that, I'm not exactly sure what to do. I do need to fix something real quick. I'm not gonna put up the screen. I'm just gonna... Share stream. uh, but recently, because Amazon Prime is the only subscription service that I currently have, um, God, my bangs look so ridiculous. I cut my hair too recently, and it's like curling because it's finally getting to like the healthy hair. But it definitely needs wash, and I should have taken care of all that. But I didn't want to be late. I didn't want to push it back any further because I want to try to stick to my schedule as best I can. So Amazon Prime. I've been watching Ghost Hunters, or I was watching the Ghost Hunters channel, the live channel, that just keeps playing episodes. And one night I was actually in the mood to watch something recently, and it was recommended to me the Steve Gonsalves documentary that's called The House in Between. Um, it's supposed to be one of the most haunted houses in America. Let's look at what the synopsis says. And for Sam and Colby, we watched some of the video together because they are fellow content creators and it's within fair use. However, I don't know exactly what the copyright laws are when it comes to like Amazon Prime and this kind of thing. So I'm not going to review, or not going to show probably any of it. Maybe maybe like an experiment here or there, but not going to. We're not gonna watch parts of it together because it might be okay for Twitch, not getting caught. You can get away with it, but all of my videos go up on YouTube afterward to live as videos, to live as videos. So I'm not gonna chance that and have to fuck with YouTube and everything because I know it's a pain in the ass with copyright and everything. Yes, I just threw on a random shirt. I was getting ready as fast as I could to appear put together for my appointment. I have so many fucking notes on this, but the description, whatever, the house in between, is a beautiful documentary telling the story of a homeowner and the team looking for answers that will move Alice back into her house. The documentary shows a detailed look at what could be the most haunted house in America. I don't know if it's a lot for you, but it's a lot for me. Maybe I just have it louder in my ears than than it is on stream. My lips are dry too. I'm not my best right now, but I'm here. It's better than I used to do. But basically, it's about this house in Florence, Mississippi, I believe. I believe it's Mississippi. And there's a lot of unexplained activity in the house. They've had multiple paranormal researchers go in and, investigate, come up with evidence, and there's certain things that consistently happen. It's also, I think, the only place, at least in the US, that researchers continue to return to, and they have a prolonged investigation. Like, the longevity of the investigation is more than just like a night or whatever. So that's easy. Oh, that's easy. It's better for documenting sake to have over the few years, because you can see how the haunting or the paranormal activity changes or grows throughout the years. Now, I went into this documentary expecting it to be like Ghost Hunters or, all the other things is like spooky and whatnot. And, trying to prove that the place is haunted with like mild debunking enough that you go, oh yeah, they tried. Enough of that. But I was pleasantly surprised by it, to be honest. I went into it, like I said, expecting like Ghost Hunters, and as I've been rewatching a lot of Ghost Hunters and stuff, there's a lot of things that I feel it's like, oh, that's, explainable, that's explainable, whatever. Ever since we did the peer-reviewed paranormal back in, I think it was September of last year, I've had a completely different view on basically everything paranormal. A little bit about my background, I guess. I got into things like Ghost Hunters and all of that when I was like a teenager, I think, maybe a little earlier, and then throughout like my teenage years and high school and everything. It was something that I was very interested in and passionate about. I knew all of the information. It's still there, It never goes away. But yeah, I loved it. I was 110% a believer, and everything was just like amazing to me. But now, as a 30-year-old woman, reviewing that, doing the peer-reviewed paranormal, talking to other people in chat, things like that, I've become a lot more skeptical of basically everything coming from like paranormal investigators or whatever, especially with like the rise and popularity of things like Sam and Colby and everything. And I've tried, like, because we wanted to do more of these, I've tried to find like questionable TikToks, questionable YouTube videos, things like that are heavily believed, but every single one that I found was very easily debunked or as like being fake, or it was part of an ARG or things like that. So it was really difficult for me to find something that was worth looking at or worth talking about. So when I went into this, I was expecting like the same similar things like what Ghost Hunters brought, which was, you know, it's mostly about finding the evidence of this place. And when you go into it, the owners basically have it in their head, the story already. Like they have it in their head that this place is haunted, and, you know, doesn't matter what Ghost Hunters says, they're going to still believe that it's haunted, anything like that. And they have their narrative already made and decided, I guess. So that's what I expected from Alice, who is the homeowner. She bought the land, I think, in the 1990s, and she built a house. I believe they had the house built on the land. And I expected her to be like, yes, I've had these crazy experiences, and, you know, I think this place is haunted, and, you know. But I was also pleasantly surprised by Alice. And I expected the entire town to be like, oh yeah, we have all kinds of weird activity everywhere, like most towns in these shows. Like when I say the like most towns, whatever, the things that I'm referencing are like Ghost Hunters show has a specific format. Um, way back when we had Paranormal State, which was this. It was a similar thing that the team would go in and investigate a place, but the person who was always in like the homeowner role or the business owner role or whatever usually had their own story or their own belief of what happened. And a lot of them, I, you know, it's obvious now when you watch it, but I guess I didn't see it when I was younger, that a lot of a lot of it is just to promote tourism in a place because everyone wants to go where it's fucking haunted, you know? So they would have ghost hunters come in and do a ghost hunt, and then everybody would see it on TV, and then the tourism would spike and they would make money. So there was a lot of being used that way, I think. So I expected the entire town to be like this, you know, to bring in more people. But actually, the town was skeptical uh, before the documentary came out. And Alice was, you know, feeling really alone in the fact that she couldn't like talk about this without being, you know, shunned or whatever you want to call it. And I personally think that Steve is probably the most skeptical of the ghost hunters, and at this point, I would say he probably has the most integrity of the ghost hunters. Um, I when I'm saying this, I'm not the four main ones for me are Jason, Grant, Steve, and Dave Tango. And Jason is questionable because of the Cody Satori thing. Um, I have a little bit of notes on that too, because there was a live stream that they did that I recorded, but I wasn't sure if I got the audio correct. I checked it last night. The audio is 100% fucked up. So I just wrote a couple notes on what it is, but that's basically why. Grant ended up leaving the show or being removed from the show. I'm not exactly sure because he was found faking evidence. And now when you look back at the series through that lens, you can't tell what's real and what's not anymore. So it kind of calls into question Jason's whole thing. And then I don't have anything against Dave Tango. He was just the younger, and he's more student in the series, so it's not like he's done anything or whatever. But Steve just put out a book, I think, and he has this documentary and has been active in the scene for a long time. So that's why I said he was the most skeptical or most integrity. And the reason I say he's the most skeptical is because when going through evidence, he's always the one that's like, no, that's a bug, no, that's dust, no, that's this, no, that's that, and dismissing a lot of, you know, what could be construed um, as paranormal evidence or whatever. If they wanted to make a story out of it, they could. And so there was a lot of him shutting down shutting down that nonsense. And I'm sure there's like a compilation somewhere of him saying no, that's a bug. But I think it is super interesting that they've been investigating this house over the span of years. They being it was two separate investigators, not Steve, not anyone from the Ghost Hunters. Um, I think it's super interesting that they've been investigating over the years, because one place that Ghost Hunters fall short is that they only spend a night there for the majority of things. I mean, they did specials here and there where they would spend like 2 nights or a week or whatever, but for the majority of it, it's just one night, and you don't get the history, you don't get like when people are interacting in the space, like if it's a workspace, people interacting in the space, you don't see how like that could kick up activity or anything like that. So they also never left equipment running just to observe that, of like people interacting in the space and whatever, and causing energy to spike and fluctuate and all of that. And they didn't, watch it as like a standard day in the building. It was just one night with nobody in there or whatever. And I also thought it was super interesting that they brought in multiple teams to investigate the place. And they have a DVR system running in the house 24/7 because Alice does not live there. The goal of the documentary was to get Alice back into the house. But it doesn't... The DVR system can't rule out things like draft or soil settling, whatever. I gotta turn down the Ko-Fi pot. I still haven't been able to do anything with it. I've been so fucking busy. But it does rule out things like human interference for the most part, which I think is good. So Alice, in terms of like the paranormal show format, she is what I would call a respectable property owner, a respectful property owner, because she doesn't push the haunted narrative. She doesn't like ever say things like that. She doesn't have it in her head that this place is haunted. She is scared because there's weird things happening and she wants an explanation, but it seems for the most part that she wants a natural explanation as for why these things are happening. She stays rational throughout and grounded, and it's not like when like Ghost Hunters ends and they say, oh, we didn't find anything or whatever, and then the property owner or the business owner is like, well, we still think it's haunted anyway. She doesn't have that type of attitude towards it. She's just afraid because it's fucking weird. It's weird when this shit happens. And I'm only going to be addressing claims that they have proof of or they show evidence of. So they have the baseball method, where they put certain toys, like a baseball, on the stairs, and they ask the ghost to push it down the stairs, and, it happens when nobody's in the house or whatever. I'm skeptical of this, even though they did debunk by, like, hitting underneath the stairs to see if shaking the stairs made the toys fall or the ball move or whatever. But again, like, I don't know, that was something that would have to be discussed, whether I want to say it's accurate or not. And so before Steve gets involved, there's a couple experts that come to the place, and by experts I thought they were going to be like paranormal experts, I guess, but I was actually pleasantly surprised that they were not. A positive is that Alice has like a semi relationship with, I think it's a contractor or something, but he's come over multiple times since 2006 to check whether the foundation of the place is level, And he stays consistent that all measurements are the same, the house is level, there's no issues of that as to why, things would roll off the stairs or whatever. So the second expert that they bring in is an electrician, because one of the claims or the things that they see on camera was lights coming on and off, like the specific chandelier would turn on and off. And the electrician came in and said they're like, looked at the electricity, looked at the switches, looked at everything, and said there's no problems, no reason as to why I think this would happen. And sorry, still zoning. And so by like building standards, there doesn't seem to be a reason as to why these things were why these things were happening. What's happening? Um, and then Steve enters, and he has an idea of multiple experts that he wants to talk to take a look at things, discuss things. They do bring up the limestone theory, which I don't know if we talked about this before, but limestone is supposed to be a conduit of energy. So in places with heavy limestone are typically the most haunted, the most paranormal. That's where like poltergeist shit happens, those things. And they want to see if like the limestone is somehow giving off this energy to make things happen in the house. So the next two experts that they talk to are physicists. Um, at least I think one of them is a professor at like UCLA or something like that. But the first expert confirms that the limestone confirms the limestone theory to like a point. Like he confirms that if something is done to the limestone, then it can put off energy. Like if you add heat to it, but it does need a catalyst. A catalyst is necessary, which would be heat for the limestone to give off energy or whatever. The limestone can't just like one day decide to be active and, poltergeist, It does have to have a catalyst. He also states that energy of any kind or static electricity, things like that can't just appear out of thin air. The law of energy is a law in which, energy cannot be created or whatever, it has to be transformed. What is that? I always reference it and I never get it right. The law of conservation of energy states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, but it can be changed from one form to another. So if, limestone is introduced to heat, that would be changing the form. This means that a system always has the same amount of energy unless there's energy added from outside. So the limestone would stay as it was unless something was added from the outside. Um, and then the second expert states that a physics action, like the ball moving, is a physics action. It's a physical action you can see. Again, can't be created or destroyed. It doesn't come out of nowhere. It would require another physics action to move, to roll, whether or not we're seeing it. So if it's wind, if it's somebody pushing it or whatever, that's still a physical action being taken on the ball to create the next physical action, which is it rolling down the stairs. And the first physicist agrees with this, that it would need a force like applied to it, which is the physics action, even if we couldn't see it. So things like air or whatnot, but rolling a ball across carpet with air is difficult to do. It's incredibly difficult to do. Another claim made in the house by Alice was that there is light coming from nowhere, like things like balls of light, random lights going around. Physicist number one says that lights can't happen spontaneously. they come from electricity or thermal energy. And then they have a weather forecaster talking. And he states that static electricity can create a ball of light or things like that, but it's it's a phenomenon called St. Elmo's fire. But if the ball was as big as she said it was of static electricity, it would be destructive because it's essentially lightning. That's the dehumidifier. Like, if you've ever had a blanket that was extra staticky, sometimes you can see, like, in the dark, you can see the static move across the blanket. But the way that she was describing these lights, they would, it would have to be big enough, like, it would have to be big enough that it would be destructive. They do toss the idea around of extraterrestrials, but it's hard to make a claim of that. They do talk about a guy in the area who was abducted by aliens at one point, but I don't know how much I'm going into that. Although we did just get, like, confirmation that aliens are real, so who knows? I'm looking at a different thing. Because physicist number 2 mentions the possibility of interdimensional reality. It's believed or theorized in the physics world that the world we live in has more dimensions than the 3D in which we observe. And but science has just begun to investigate that, so there's no claim on whether it's um, a thing or not. But I thought I remember reading about an experiment with tardigrades that was like that, but maybe I'm thinking of something else. But that experiment was in, 2020 maybe, so super new in terms of science and shit. So it's just a theory at this point still. looking at dimensional physics experiments. But all they have is, it's not the tardigrade that I was thinking about. Is it string theory? String theory intriguingly suggests that more than 6 dimensions exist, but are somehow hidden from our senses. I may be wrong, but I thought that there was an experiment of maybe it was an electron that existed in 2 separate dimensions, and what you did to one was seen in the other, even though what you were doing wasn't necessarily seen. But this goes back to the double slit experiment, which is that is the string theory experiments. Which shows that light acts as a wave. I guess it might be quantum mechanics that they were talking about the electrons functioning. So basically, if I moved this particle in this dimension, then the one in this dimension would also move, even though you couldn't see my hand moving it. It's not, that's way off base, but that's really way off from what it actually was, but that's what I essentially was remembering from it, but I can't exactly remember. Yeah, I put in my notes that they did the experiment. I remember reading about the experiment in 2020, but I can't find exactly the one I'm looking for. If I do find it later, I'll talk about it. But the next thing I said is, what the fuck is a REM pod? Because the original paranormal investigators that go into the place to investigate use REM pods a lot, and I thought that was one of the things that we covered with Sam and Colby, that they used REM pods, and the REM pods could be set off by things like phones, cameras, whatever. Is that the right one? this guy watch? John Wolf. I think you can. The only water I have is. I was looking for the part where John Wolf explained the REM pods. It brings up the. I actually have two. I am so heavily addicted to those. The San Pellegrinos. They're so good. I don't have. It was in the first episode of that. If I can go back on my channel and find it. I buy them by the case. It's so bad. But I mean, it's not the worst thing. To be addicted to high mineral water. Nobody talks fast enough for me. Oh my god. Yep. This guy, the channel is PSI Paranormal Investigators, and it's called Rampods Debunked. Right into how middle of like how it works section. He says that if you use the two-way near REM pods, they will go off. So all of that, I don't really trust it. But as a note, Steve does not use the REM pods. It's just the guys that do the normal investigating in the house. And then is the psychics, which, like, I personally don't know if I should discuss it, but I guess I'm going to. Steve makes note of it in the documentary that he doesn't use them, but he goes about it the best that he can by not allowing the psychic to know where she was going. And like all that psychic stuff, it might seem hypocritical because I do practice divination. I have done it on the channel. I can read tarot cards, I read tea leaves, and I do consider myself intuitive on a certain level. However, in my opinion, when you communicate with spirit, you are not communicating with ghosts of dead people. Your spirit team or your spirit guides, all of that is essentially the same thing, in my opinion, which is, it's God, the universe, whatever, the higher power is in the situation. So she makes a completely unsubstantiated claim that a murder happened on the property, and I personally see that to be predatory and fear mongering and not okay. Honestly haven't tried liquid death, but when I looked it up, it doesn't have a high TDS, and I'm like a water nerd, so I need high TDS, which sparkling mineral water has. But the bubbles get so addicting. And honestly, I feel like it's better carbonation than like soda, which I guess I do still drink, but I'm getting less and less. I'm drinking less and less soda because it's just not as good and it gets flat so quickly. But that's because in comparison of what I'm drinking all the time is this the San Pellegrino. It's just not as good. There's a girl, a neighbor girl, who claims that there's bodies buried in the yard, but honestly, I feel like it could be that she's unconsciously picking up on something that less sensitive people would not pick up on. Um, by saying like, this area feels weird, this area makes me sick, things like that. Um, like the smell that the cadaver dog confirms later does exist on the property. She could be unconsciously smelling it, and a smell like that will make you sick. It will make you nauseous. It will make you feel uneasy, even if you're not consciously smelling it, because it's decomp. That's what it is. It's the bacteria that causes it. So she mentioned throwing up, passing out. Those things can all be explained by hypersensitivity to smells. Um, they don't state that the smell exists, but most humans who visit the place mention that it feels off there. So again, could be picking up on some things. They say that there's multiple dimensions. Again, that can't be proven, but in theory, it could be more probable than ghosts because of the fact that when, you know, millennia we've been studying ghosts, we've been trying to prove the paranormal, and nobody has definitively given evidence that this does exist. But in physics and science, they state that, the dimensions could exist, the possibility is there, the theory is there, but they have yet to prove it. So, in my opinion, higher probability of correctness is is just, could be dimensions. But like, I know that I've gone to places as like a hypersensitive person and picked up on something like, this place feels off, this place makes me feel scared, or um just, you go somewhere and it's like the energy here is weird, and then you find out later that there's an electrical problem that I was picking up on that nobody else was, or like a high pitched ringing that I was picking up on that nobody else was. Those things can be attributed to non paranormal causes, normal causes. And the claim that children are more open to things than adults could also be explained by sensitivity. Some kids are sensitive, and they don't. It's not all kids see ghosts. It's, some of them, and we never know what exactly they're experiencing. Like the phenomena of the Hat Man, which before before we were all taking way too much Benadryl and confronting the Hat Man, it's a phenomenon that has existed on, like, throughout the world for, you know decades, maybe hundreds of years. It happens in primarily children who are experiencing toxic households, abuse, things like that. They will see the Hat Man. I have personally seen the Hat Man when I was a kid. Wouldn't really call it a ghost. Maybe it's a trauma symptom, a CPTSD thing. It could be that. But because the underlying commonality of these cases is that most of the children, or all the children, were experiencing some kind of trauma, it could be related to that. So it's not like he's a protector or an omen or whatever, like Mothman. And then finally, they have the cadaver dog come in, which that's the expert that I put the most trust in. He signals at the plants and the trees mostly, and we learned that even if the bodies were removed or had fully decomp decomposition into the soil, that the smell would still live in the plants. Like the plants still give off that smell because they're getting their nutrients from the soil, which contains this bacteria. Um, the dog signals on the trees and not any of the land, and his handler concludes that the area may have been an old cemetery because they got like relocated a long time ago because, they have a history of doing this. They've done the cemetery thing before. So they go to a local historian. Steve goes to a local historian, and the local historian ends up confirming that the land was, in fact, part of the original cemetery for the town originally. However, all of the records got burned in a town fire, so they don't have records that the body was there, but it's that bodies were there, but essentially it was in the zone, like the zoning map for the cemetery. So one could conclude from the data that it was a cemetery. But she says if bodies were there, they were there before the fire, years and years ago, and nothing has been buried there since. And then towards the end, Steve gets emotional about the place, but gives no clue to why. He claims that the house took time away from his daughter, or from a mother and daughter, and I was really confused by that initially. I thought that that was a wild claim to make because like it's a house, you know. But we'll put a pin in that for later. And then this is where like the documentary pretty much wraps up. Part one, pretty much wraps up. Besides, there's a last instance with the ball, which again I don't know how much stake I want to put into the ball rolling down the stairs multiple times. Um, and then they see doors slamming, which they say like the way that the doors go that it couldn't be a draft, but I would disagree because I've seen weird stuff like that happen and it was a draft. Um, but I do think that it's cool that they caught both the ball rolling down the stairs and the doors, but they caught the doors in the reflection on of the chandelier. Like it wasn't on camera, but the camera was pointed at the chandelier, which was reflecting the doors, so they saw both of the doors slam. But again, I don't know whether to call it evidence or it's a drafty place. I don't know. So the part one doesn't have great reviews, and I want to go into why I think that's so. I think there's a few different reasons. Is that one, fans were expecting like ghost hunters, like I mentioned that I was expecting going into it. If you were wanting to see paranormal activity and you want to get scared or things like that, this documentary would probably bore you. I was expecting that and to go in like we did with Sam and Colby and explain away most of it, but I was pleasantly surprised at the very analytical approach that they took to the documentary. But again, it's not what I would call spooky, and even the description describes it as a beautiful documentary or something like that. And number two was that the documentary left so much to be desired. I was almost like yelling at the screen, like mad at Steve, because what do you mean that they found an old cemetery? They found proof of an old cemetery and they didn't do underground radar, sonar, whatever it is. Um, because I know that he knows that that exists because they did it for an episode of Ghost Hunters at one point, at least one episode. They claimed that there was some family buried on the ground and the ghost hunters wanted to prove it, so they hired the underground sonar guy. And the crying part had me questioning like if I had missed something somewhere, but watching it back the second time, again, I don't feel that I did. Um, They set out to get Alice back into the house, and then towards the end of the documentary, when they're wrapping up, they don't even mention that, even though it was mentioned in the beginning. The conclusion came off really messy and didn't conclude anything. Um, and had I watched this in 2020 when it was released, I would probably be angry as well. There's no mention of a part two, and there's no indication that there's more to the story. That's just how it ends and it's done. And it feels like, what? Like, there's so much more that could have happened, and it's like just over an hour or something, so it's not. It's not like it was way too long or whatever to add it. But because I was a member of Amazon Prime, I got recommended part two right away. Part two was released 2 years later. So for part two, I did have to rent it. If you do want to see it, it probably has to be rented. Um, but I had Amazon credits from before from shipping, so I had used them up, and I did. So, and I don't regret it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. If I was to rent it again, I would probably, or if I was to do it again, uh, I wouldn't change my choices in spending my credits. But part two came in serving answers. um, After part one, Alice got treated a lot better by the town, which is good. So she mentioned in part one that she had to hide this like secret of, you know, being afraid to be in the house because nobody was going to believe her. And if it's something like an intelligence bigger than yourself, who the fuck's going to help you? Like, essentially, which I liked. Um, and as they're like interviewing Alice, they're also showing some evidence from past investigations. I don't know who all these people are because they don't mention. There's like a couple women in it. Um, I don't know. And it's the first evidence that we encounter is whistling and something rolling down the stairs again. And I said it's hard to make a claim because I still don't know, like, why, what the fuck is wrong with these stairs? While they were interviewing Alice, though, for um, this part, they caught a lady's voice on multiple mics that wasn't in the room. It was just a random voice on it. And so I thought that was really interesting. I don't know if that's necessarily proof of anything. Um, and they say that the house is learning to communicate, which I also said is difficult to claim as fact. But in the fact that this is the longest running paranormal investigation, as they keep returning to this place, they constantly have the place under surveillance, under videos, things like that. Uh, the increase in evidence could be assumed that it's learning. However, it's difficult to prove correlation and causation, essentially. The fact is that we don't know the capabilities of an intelligent haunting because we've never done anything like this before. And we as in like humans. And intelligent haunting is one that's supposed to know that it's not part of our world. It's supposed to know that it's not the year that they passed away or anything, versus a what they call a residual haunting, which is just like an energy playback of something that existed in the area that keeps existing over and over, and it keeps replaying like a record or something. And I feel that that's interesting because of the law of conservation of energy, is that like that energy has to be transformed, it can't be destroyed. I think that there's something to that because of how I feel about how much energy is like inside of us, and then we just go away. It doesn't make sense to me. And like the answer is just that of like what happens to our energy is we go in the ground and we decompose, and then the trees, and that's how our energy gets transformed. I don't think that that's complex enough for all of the energy that it takes to keep a human body alive, like for like with electrolytes and all of that. Our brains are essentially run by that. So I feel like a residual haunting kind of makes sense in that way of being energy, but the intelligent haunting is something that can communicate as if it was a real conscious being there. It's just completely invisible, which if dimensions are a thing, it could be something outside of the dimensions that we can comprehend as humans. I mean, and then that's not difficult to say that we can't comprehend everything in our world, because even color spectrum, humans can't see all colors that, other animals can see. So we know exist, but we just can't see them. Uh, could it be dimensional phenomena? And like I said, in my opinion, it's more possible than ghosts because of how little we know about dimensional theory, interdimensional theory. And we've been studying ghost activity for how long, and nobody has come up with something that's like, this is definitive proof that there is life after death. Unless you're Katori, of course, but I'm gonna share my note on that. Uh, but scientists and physicists have just begun to study dimensions, and that the theory exists, and that there is something there to it. So the possibility of it being, of intelligent hauntings being some kind of dimensional rip or dimensional communication, something like that. And so after this beginning sequence of, interviewing Alice and then going into the investigation, they come back to Alice, and this is where the bomb gets dropped. Alice's daughter was part of the first part of the documentary and investigation. However, before the release of the first film, she passed away due to illness. It's at this point that it becomes clear that the reason part one felt so incomplete was because they couldn't use everything that they had. Besides the one moment of Steve's emotion, Ashley, who is the daughter, was not mentioned at all in part one, even though she was there and was interviewed, as you can see they show clips of in part two. Now, knowing of Steve and his personality, which, again, I keep saying Steve, this is produced by two people. I don't know who the other guy is, or I'm assuming it's his wife because they have the same last name. I just know of Steve from years of being interested in this topic. But knowing Steve and his personality from his work over the years, it's obvious that he made these choices out of respect for Alice and the family. As a result, the film that he could produce and put out wasn't as good, and unlike probably most filmmakers, he didn't put his art over the family. He didn't exploit the family. And to that, I have great respect for Steve. Neither documentary felt exploitative of Alice or the house as a place that Ashley existed in. I was blown away by the ability of filmmakers to not use emotion to sway anything they did. Even when they talk about Ashley in the beginning of part two, they don't add like the dramatic music and all of that shit that we saw with past paranormal stuff, that you couldn't really call it a documentary because they were trying to pull on your emotions so hard. So I had great respect for Steve for that. That's also probably the reason that the second part of the documentary took so long to come out, and also why there was no indication that there was going to be a part two, or that there was more that they were going to be giving. Again, mad respect. They didn't put it at the end because they didn't know if they were going to be able to put out more, because they didn't want to be, exploitative of Alice. And so it doesn't, when they finish part one, it's like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish telling the story that I wanted to tell, because this traumatic thing happened, this tragedy happened. And also, mad respect to Alice, because even though she experienced a great tragedy, she didn't become less grounded than she originally was. She still wanted a natural answer for everything. She concludes her thoughts about Ashley being part of the organ playing or whatever as saying, I'm not saying it was her, but if she could do that, I know she would. And I thought that was a very grounded thing, because a lot of people, when going through something like grief or whatever, they want to make a narrative, they want to make an explanation as to, why this thing happens, or that this person is still with us, so they don't feel the loss as much. But she doesn't seem to do that. She seems to be pretty grounded, and she says, wherever Ashley is, I know she's happy. So I had a lot of respect for that. So moving on to the science, they ended up putting up a Faraday tent type thing. They don't ever call it that because I don't think it's like technically one, but the compared to the Faraday tent from the Sam and Colby episode that we did back in September, um, it's a lot better. It makes the other one look very sad. um, but after that, they bring in the underground sonar guy. Oh my gosh! Hey girl, thank you so much for the raid. I appreciate you. Every time I have to permit something and it's in the taint. Oh, the Automod is crazy. We are currently going through. I hope you had a great stream, by the way. We are currently going through my episode of what we call peer reviewed paranormal, where I look at different either videos or whatever. Today's documentary is The House in Between, produced, directed by Steve Gonsalves of Ghost Hunters. That's good. I'm glad you feel better. I wrote a lot of notes on it, which I think is kind of funny because when I was doing this kind of stuff in college, like art critique and whatever was one of my worst, and I hated it, and now I absolutely love it. But I think it's because like my understanding changed. I just learned that there was a term for that too. Like, is it Bloom's taxonomy? What is... Yeah. Yeah, so Bloom's taxonomy at the bottom is remember and recall, which is how I feel like a lot of my memory went. But as you go up, you can understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and eventually create. And most people don't get to like the creation point in understanding. Actually, the majority of people stay in the lower ranks of the taxonomy, which in America could be contributed to our education system because our education system teaches us to memory recall, doesn't teach us to understand. So there's that. And I feel like I moved up in the rungs. But anyways, they do bring the underground sonar that I was desperately begging for at the end of part one, because at the end of part one, they found that the area was part of the original cemetery, and sorry, where Dickles got me, because that's still in my chat. They bring up the fact that there's like legitimate proof that bodies at least were theoretically buried there because they were part of the original mapping of the cemetery, but all of the records got burned in this big town fire, so like there was no answers. And I'm like, at the end, I'm like, come on, just do the underground sonar. But the underground sonar guy concludes that the soil contains pockets of man-made fill. I appreciate the note. Thank you. um, but there's these pockets under the soil of where, like, when the body was buried there, or when the bodies were buried there, after they decomposition and everything, it creates this little pocket, and then the soil on top of it is different because of the way that they fill the graves in. So he found multiple plots throughout this land that this existed, which is what the cadaver dog concluded, which, again, the cadaver dog is my most trusted expert in this entire thing. I'm clinging to what the dog says. And then, so Steve brings in a geophysicist who studies the soil and ends up coming to the same conclusion that there's these anomalies that look like that the soil is not acting as it would if there was not, man-made digging done. She has a moment. Ione, what's going on? She has a moment that she claims that she saw like a man walk past the tent, and for me, it's hard to conclude that it was an apparition. Steve says in it that there's multiple people have claimed to see a male apparition in this area, and the other guy says that the description of the man mostly matched what the other people have claimed. However, I know that, like, I know what my brain can do when my nervous system is dysregulated, as we talked in, like, earlier. Actually, it was last week when I was writing my podcast episode. So, coming across information that supports that the soil was used in a cemetery or that there were bodies there is something that can, like, activate your nervous or dysregulate your nervous system, which it's like when you're dysregulated is like when you find out something that you're not supposed to or something like that, and you get that like adrenaline rush and you get like shaky, that kind of thing. If you're alone at night working on this thing that you assume that like as a rational person you're supposed to be observing the soil, or as a scientist you're supposed to be observing the soil and whatever, and you come across the fact that there could be bodies there, that is something that could dysregulate your nervous system. And when your nervous system gets dysregulated, you can do things like hallucinate, like I did earlier in the week of seeing somebody come through the door multiple times when my door was fucking locked. There's no way, but I still saw like the shadow of someone coming through. So that could explain the feeling, and you get like, I get all flushed and everything, and her face was like all red, and things like that. It could be a hallucination, in my opinion. Rains are scary. Rains are very scary. And then they come back to the psychics. The first one, they bring back the lady psychic, and I don't trust it at all, because for the first part, she made a wild claim that the murder happened on the property, and that can't be proven at all. There's no record of it. It's a completely unsubstantiated claim. And then she comes back making more hard claims that are based on dreams that she has, which she claims to be like her psychic whatever. And the thing that she says in the second one doesn't match what she says in the first one, because in the first one, when she supposedly didn't know where she was going, she didn't have any idea of this place, no history whatsoever, she says that there's a man or a male spirit there who was plain evil. And then in the second one, when she comes back, she says that the man either wants to be found out or something like that, like they want us to dig this up or whatever. It doesn't match, so I don't know. I think she's just making up shit to be predatory. And then they bring in a second psychic, and like, trigger warning for like slavery and lynchings. The second psychic comes in, and like, she says at this point that there was a hanging there. He says that there was a slave that was lynched there. That doesn't mean much to me. Not in the fact that this horrible thing happened. The fact that they're making these claims doesn't mean to me that this actually happened, because I personally think they were trying to like show that they did something, that they helped in some way with the bit that they did. We saw in the peer-reviewed Paranormal of the Conjuring house, I did a small bit of research about the house, the Conjuring house, on camera, and we found that most, if not all, of the most haunted buildings in America have a history of slavery with them. Whether or not they were conscious of this, it's what made it easy for Ed and Lorraine Warren to do what they did and prey on these people. the locations of the most haunted places or whatever had no prior paranormal history or problems to the Warrens coming in. So these places weren't haunted until the Warrens decided to just show up one day. Um, they have, like I said, they have no history of paranormal, but what they did have in common was a history of plantation slavery. And it was sometimes even like in Connecticut, it was the same plantation that ended up broken up into multiple house deeds. So multiple people now owned this land. And then they would go to different houses of this land. So I'm not saying that they were conscious of the plantation things, but in some areas the history just disappeared or things like that of the most horrific things that happened on the property. So if they, saw the pattern of people trying to cover the history, they could prey on them that way. That's the dehumidifier again. um, in these places, it would offer more accuracy to the truth to claim that a slave was lynched there than to say basically anything else because of the horrific American history that occurred at the time. So it was more likely that this happened on these places that have this history. So if I go in as a psychic and make this claim, like just based on probability or whatever, it's more likely to be true. I have no respect for anybody that does this. I don't blame Steve himself for the psychics, as he wasn't the only producer or person working on this film. And of themselves, psychics aren't necessarily harmful, but to do the whole at the end of, the psychics coming together and being like, yeah, we think somebody was hanged on this land and everything, they go and say, like, he wanted his story to be told. He just wanted to be seen or whatever. I thought it was a cheap rationale to justify the claims that they made earlier and show that they did something somehow. Exploiting a probable, not just possible lynching is fucking gross. But moving on, it doesn't seem that the team, Alice, or anybody puts weight into what the psychics say. I don't necessarily know why it was included, and I think that the documentary could exist without that exploitation. A lot of ghost hunting is exploitative of that narrative, and they tack it on as fact, but it seems that the narrative for this documentary continues down the path that the land was a cemetery and not the plantation. And multiple scientists and historians and our cadaver dog have evidence of bodies being buried there at one time. So the history supports cemetery, but I don't know why these two psychics came in with their whole thing. I didn't like it. It felt really gross to me. And being the whole, he just wanted to be seen and now he can be happy. Fuck off. Just, you know. They decide to dig and use a metal detector to see if there's evidence of burials or a past structure that did exist there on the land, because like we said, Alice bought this land in 1990 and put a house on it, so it's not like the house existed before she knew what was happening in it. They do understand that digging these up is a moral gray area, but in understanding like all of the history and everything, what they actually have facts of, there shouldn't be any reason of a recent burial on the property. So if they were to come across that, they would have to call authorities because it's not part of the cemetery that originally existed. I'm gonna dump the dehumidifier real quick. I think there was an episode of, well, I definitely know there was an episode of Ghost Hunters at one point. I don't know if it was Steve there or not, but the narrative that these people had of their place was that the slaves murdered their owner, and they painted off as the slaves were these horrible, horrific people. And if we know history, we know that that's not true. So, but they also didn't find any evidence that those names or those people still existed on the land. Which, why would they if they got to leave that? Um, so I think that whole thing is just incredibly predatory, but it happens in a lot of ghost hunting stuff because of how fucking gross our history was. They even mention in this that before Florence was originally settled, um, the guy who the guy whose wife founded it, um, when like they got there, he wandered off at some point and was, you know, the rumor is that he was killed by Native Americans, but that's like he doesn't say it, but a lot of our history is under the guise of the whole Native American savage, which is just racism. So we don't know what happened to him. He could have fallen into the river for all we know, and just blamed on these people because it's never our fault. um, but with the digging of the land, they discover like a little bit of fabric, like little pieces of fabric, and a piece of paper with some writing on it, which just looked like I don't know how to describe it. Like when they use chemicals or things like that in construction, they have certain like numbers on them. So it looked like a label like that, like it had like some kind of numbers like that. And but they didn't find any evidence of recent burials, so there's that. And they found no evidence that there was old structures there, as our cadaver dog said. um, so they bring in another paranormal investigator. If you watched Ghost Hunters in the past, they bring in Dustin, and they bring in another investigator named Elizabeth, who has a background in electrical engineering. They, at first, it doesn't seem that there's any more. Welcome, Lexi Shoes. Because the way that it goes, they bring in the investigators, and then they do the digging, and then they go back to investigating. So at the first point with the investigators, it doesn't seem like there's any groundbreaking activity. Then they do the digging, find that there was no past, or there's no recent burials or past structures, and then they go back to the investigation. So the electrical engineer, I thought, offered a really good insight with the point that a lot of paranormal instruments are sold on such a wide scale due to popularity, and for the most part, the majority of people using them have no idea why or how the sensors on the instruments that they are using are pinging. So they don't know how to rule out a false positive, which, like we saw with Sam and Colby, every little thing was, oh my god, ghost! You know, they don't know how to rule anything out because they don't know what sensors are in the items and why the sensors act the way that they do. And possibly the most interesting part of the investigation portion of the documentary was the EVP session that was done by Dustin and Elizabeth. She introduces a positive ion motor, which I don't know exactly what it is, but it basically alters the energy field in the area. And she wanted to see if it changed responses in any way. And they even went about like using a deck of cards. Like they held a deck of cards, and then they, would show one card down and ask like, what is, what number is it? What color is it? So in the first portion, before they bring in the ion motor or whatever it's called, the answers were correct. Like they got a couple of correct answers. So then they bring in the motor and they get correct answers that are more clear. They ask the same questions, they get the same answers, but a more clear version of the answer. And they are the ghost, the EVP, whatever it is able to um, tell what the cards are, even though it was a blind experiment for them. Obviously, it's not double blind because it's how can you double blind a ghost? But I don't know. But again, that I think that supports more of like an interdimensional theory than it does a ghost. But I guess that's just me. I don't think that proves a haunting necessarily, but it does demonstrate that if more scientists took an interest into things like this, that we could possibly get more paranormal evidence or whatever you want to call it, because you can get more accurate research for people who understand the equipment that they're using. That's all. Instead of being like these random people who have an interest in the paranormal getting evidence, you get like actual people who understand what they're doing and why certain anomalies could occur and why false positives happen and why certain fluctuations happen. But just for the reason that they know that they're what they're doing. But because paranormal stuff is so like science is like nah, that you don't get a lot of scientific people who want to study this thing. The next expert that they bring in is a hypnotherapist. And I don't know enough about hypnotherapy to make any claims on that, but I did respect the fact that she mentioned the goal was to shift the energy inside of Alice from being fear-based to being curiosity, and I thought that was a really interesting way to put it, because again, the goal of both of these documentaries was to get Alice back into the house. At the end of documentary 1, they don't even mention that goal at all, but there was reasons for it, as we found out. But after the hypnotherapy session is when they finally come to the conclusion or the goal of getting Alice back at the house, which, like you said, we were waiting for at the end of part 1 of seeing how Alice handled all of this. And she does end up spending a night in the house. They saw it. It was they were like watching over her from the Faraday tent. I'm the one calling it a Faraday tent. They don't call it that, but it's like a big metal-ish tent that's what it looks like it's supposed to be. It looks more like a Faraday tent than the one that Sam and Colby used, which I think was just aluminum foil wrapped around poles. So they had people like watching over her in case something happened. And the end of the documentary gave like the beautiful transformative story of Alice returning to her home and taking her power back. It's the thing that they tried so hard to accomplish the first time. It's the thing that was in the description of the first part, which is a beautiful documentary telling the real story of a homeowner and the team looking for answers that will move Alice back into her house. That was the whole synopsis of part 1, and they did not conclude or wrap up on that at all. But what happened was that Alice's daughter, who was part of the first film, ended up passing away, and they didn't use any footage in the first part from her or anything that mentioned her or anything like that, exploited her or anything like that. So it ended like the art and the film ended up suffering because of the tragedy, but I think that there's more respect in that and not including it because it could be exploitative of Alice or Ashley. But it felt really good, and it gave that feeling that I think that they were going for, of the transformation story of Alice and her becoming strong. Like, it was really good to see. But then at the end, they teased a new toy, which was a baby carriage, like the ones that you like roll that hold like a baby doll. And they put the baby carriage at the top of these stairs, which again, I don't know how I feel about these fucking stairs, because part of their evidence is putting a ball on the stairs and saying push that ball down, and it'll sit static for sometimes hours, sometimes weeks, months, and then all of a sudden it'll just roll down the stairs. They did ruling out of it being level, like the house being level. They ruled out like hitting the stairs, like vibrations would make it move. They are carpeted stairs, so that does add friction, which makes it more difficult. They do try blowing it down the stairs with air as well, which they're not able to do. So they mention at the end of possibly that the baby carriage is going to go down the stairs at one point. And it was possibly teasing a part 3 to the series. Personally, I wouldn't mind seeing Alice come back into her home, like answering if she stayed more than just the one night. Has the activity become more intelligent, as they say, it's learning to communicate, and possibly seeing more experts come in and be open-minded to trying out their instruments. You know, I think that would be cool. But is it necessary? I don't think so. I think that they finally wrapped the documentary that they set out to make originally, and it had unexpected issues, but I'm glad that they stuck with it and came out with the part 2 2 years later, because it did give like a wholeness to the story. Part 2 has better reviews than part 1, so I think it's pretty clear that it wasn't the documentary itself that fell short in part 1, but it was more working within the confines of their humanity to try and tell a story, and it couldn't be completely done with what they had by removing the things that they needed to remove in order to not be morally fucked up. So my conclusion was overall respect, but fuck that psychic lady. That was my writing. And then in the beginning, I talked about the integrity of the ghost hunters over the years, and how I said Steve was probably known as the like one with the most integrity, but that's not a slight against Dave Tango. It's just that with the whole Grant was faking evidence for a long time, so once he got found out and removed from the show, it makes you question everything that the ghost hunters had done before. So the bit that I wrote was actually there was a Cody and Satori who were the infamous paranormal couple from the Sam and Colby documentary. Sam and Colby video. That's not a documentary. Whatever they want to call it. But they did a live stream on TikTok one day, and I happened to see it. And I tried to record it on my laptop, but I fucked up the audio, so it really can't be reviewed. But there's one claim that I remember Satori specifically mentioning that I thought was pretty fucked up, which she specifically mentioned that they had gotten like a password response for people, which they essentially act as like a Ouija board and then spell out, and the ghosts tap and, you know, answer the questions. It's a completely new method or whatever. Even though as they get questioned and found out, they keep saying like, oh, well, it's not new to use like the alphabet, like whatever. I digress. But Harry Houdini actually had a massive interest in the paranormal, as not his main, because he was an illusionist, a magician, whatever, but it was famous that he told his wife when he died a specific phrase, which is like the password. So if she went to a psychic or paranormal person or whatever and they said this phrase, it meant that they were legitimately talking to him. And she went to so many different psychics and things like that. They did it together, like when he was alive, and then after he passed they did. And she went to so many that claimed that they were talking to Harry and whatever, but they never gave the password, so she always knew it was bullshit. So Harry Houdini's ghost never came through for his wife. If anyone's ghost could do it, you would think it would be him. But so not only would making this claim and that they got a password from somebody, like before they died, they said a word. Like if I told you guys, like if I come back and say butts or whatever, then you know it's me. And then you like psychic comes through and says it, then you know it's me. So not only would it be successfully completing a Houdini stunt, which is notoriously difficult to do, not impossible, but difficult, it would also be proving without a doubt that the afterlife exists, which is something that neither Houdini nor any psychic nor paranormal investigator or anyone in the history of humans has been able to do. So it's an enormous claim to make beyond the normal shtick of tapping in the alphabet. It's gross and exploiting these people who are in a vulnerable place, whether it be grief, questioning their beliefs, wanting to know if, the person they love is still around. It's exploiting these people, and it's entirely fucked up and not okay by any means. Not only that, on a less important note, she's completely tainting her father's reputation, which she is the daughter of Jason Hawes, who is the main person behind TAPS, which is what Ghost Hunters is. He was known forever as a respectable face in the paranormal world, who has faced this issue once when his business partner, Grant, was caught faking evidence for popularity and to make the show better. Rewatching this time was the first time of me watching Grant leave the show from, like, this point of view. And it completely called into question every episode that he had been a part of before. And you could visibly see on Jason's face, especially like when Grant says, nobody did anything wrong as a reason that he's leaving, you can visibly see Jason, like, and not, he can't say anything, but probably contractually he couldn't. But you could just see how much it hurt. Jason's integrity has always been the forefront of his work in the paranormal. I watched Ghost Hunters like all of my life. I read his book or books when they came out. I remember getting them from the library. So whether this integrity was, real as who he is as a person, or if it was just for the show, Grant's actions at the very best ruined Jason's integrity and business TAPS, and Grant's actions at best ruined Jason's business at TAPS, and at worst ruined Jason's integrity in all that he had ever done in the field. So at best he's destroying the business's integrity, at worst he's destroying Jason's integrity as a person, as a human. And it's no secret that Cody is a con man. From Cody Satori, their little method, Cody is a con man. I am telling you straight up, he makes paranormal equipment, claiming that he doesn't in this. He did the tapping method before ever meeting Satori, and they prove that, and the couple just dismisses it as, oh yeah, everybody's used the alphabet method or whatever. Everybody who's ever used a Ouija board uses the same thing. It's not. It's the very specific way that he asks, and the answers are given in these taps. Not taps. Not taps the company, but like the taps in the floorboards. And it's easy to pick up that he's disingenuous, and Satori participating in this ruins the Haas name in the paranormal world. Jason can never actually come forward about this. I mean, he kind of had to do an interview, but he can't ever say anything about it, because no matter what he says on the matter, he either hurts all of the people who have ever looked up to and respected him as part of this field, or he hurts his daughter by talking on what she did and the man that she loves. So he's caught in a really fucked up place. And personally, I think that that's a really shitty situation to put somebody that you love in. If you're going to follow your father's legacy into whatever field that he goes, you should make sure that you're not taking a giant shit on it. But I digress. Was my writing. I think like nobody likes when the boss's son comes into a business and absolutely destroys it because he doesn't respect what the business stood for or what the business is about or whatever, and he fucks up and disrespects everybody. I think that that's exactly what Satori is doing by participating in this and claiming that they don't ever do it for money when behind the scenes they are, which, you know, was a thing of ghost hunters, and a lot of people thought that they were making a lot of money on what they were doing when in fact that they weren't, and they weren't being paid a lot for certain things. And maybe as the years went on and they'd been, you know, having a TV show for like 10 years, they had more money coming in. But for the majority of taps before the show and in the first couple seasons of the show, Jason and Grant were full-time plumbers. They were blue-collar workers, and they kept this. I don't know how they ended up getting the whole Roto-Rooter brand into the show. Things were different back then, I guess, but they were plumbers for the majority of it. So it's not like they were being paid a lot, unless they said they did multiple meetups and everything where people thought that they were driving like these insane cars and everything, and they weren't. It was, you know, people misreading logos or things like that. So it's when ghost hunters came under the fire of like, you're only doing this for money or whatever, they were able to prove that they weren't. When Cody and Satori say that they're not making any money on this, it is very easy to prove that in fact that they are, as first of all, employees of the Conjuring House, where they practice this method all the time. They are being paid by the hour. They are being paid by every group that comes in. Is the fees are astronomical for getting a tour of this place, and they do multiple tours a day, like $500 or more. So they're getting a lot of money for this. So they are doing it for money. So claiming that they're not is ridiculous, and also the fact that they're trying to have a social media following after this and everything is also another way that they're making money and gaining off of people's vulnerabilities and people's grief. I think that that's really fucked up, and I don't agree with it at all. And I honestly think in a few years we're probably going to get some real story on that, because you could tell that there's emotion behind it because of the way that Satori acts in videos and live streams and everything. And she is caught to do most of the talking, whereas Cody just nods the whole time, even though it's Cody's method, it's Cody's instruments that they're using, that he creates, that he says he has no time to create, when that's actually his job. He has a business in which he sells instruments of paranormal or whatever, which is another way he's making money off of this. So I think that that's my whole thing with them. I think that, like, when you have, it's not even a public face, because it's any business. Like, if there was a local business and you always knew that the guy who owned this local business, or this, you know, this local HVAC business or whatever, the guy's always, you know, great and going above and beyond for his customers, and then his son takes over and, you know, doesn't do those things, then basically everything goes to shit. And everything that the father had spent all of these years building up is gone. And he can't ever defend himself, because it's either disappoint everybody that's ever been a fan of me or disappoint my actual family. So it's a really shitty place, I think, to be stuck in. It's a really shitty place to put somebody in. And I personally don't I don't understand it. I guess going with the guy that you're gonna marry or whatever, and whatever scheme he has to get rich. But I don't know. As somebody who doesn't even speak to my parents anymore, like, I wouldn't. Like, that's a shitty thing to do, just in general. But back to why we originally got here was the house in between. I do recommend a watch, but like I said, first one doesn't have great reviews. Oh, and the other reason why I don't think it has great reviews is the Amazon genre is like really fucked up. Like, the first one is eerie and scary, and the second one is under horror, and none of that fits. Maybe eerie. I think eerie is probably good. Scary, not really. Like you know, when you go into Ghost Hunters, if you're believing and everything, and you get a little bit spooked by it, you know, as you would like a scary movie or whatever. But if you go into this documentary expecting to get that feeling, you're not gonna get it, because he does everything from an analytical point of view, which I actually appreciated. I went into it thinking that it was gonna be just like another Ghost Hunters thing, and it was basically just gonna prove the haunting with mild just debunking. But I was pleasantly surprised by the sheer amount of experts and the type of experts that they were able to get to participate. And even the historian, who's like, I don't believe in any of this ghost shit, was helpful and a great resource, you know. And our favorite, the cadaver dog, because cadaver dogs never lie. It's really interesting if you're interested in investigations of the paranormal and things like that, and looking at ways that you can learn to maybe debunk and do things a little better. It's good for that. But if you're like a believer and everything, you might not like it as much. I don't know. The whole point of getting Alice back into her house was like it got basically passed over in the first one, but I see why, because at the end of the documentary, if that was the point in like filming that her daughter had passed away, that's not almond joy, ugh, coconut, because her daughter had, you know, passed away. They wouldn't want to, if they had morals, which it seems that they do by the way that they approach this, they wouldn't want to like step on all of that and be like, you know, you should get back in this house in which your daughter existed. Like, that's kind of a fucked up thing to do. So I get why they didn't say that in wrapping, and they didn't say that there was going to be a part two, and part two took years to come out. They didn't mention that they had more footage or evidence or anything. It was just basically it wrapped up. It wrapped up really quickly. Um, and like I said, left things to be desired. So I understand why it has the rating that it does. But if you go into part two, you see why all this happened and why and you finally get the goal of the entire documentary. So I think that they did a really good job within the confines of keeping morals and everything. And the only time that there's any like sadness or whatever is the part one where he mentions, you know, took time from a mother and her daughter, and they don't use like the sad music or anything. They do use a little bit of music, but it's more like when they're doing the digging or whatever, they play like investigative music, like not the Jeopardy theme, but something similar. That's just like, you know, kind of neutral, but it's not dead air underneath. So I appreciated that. I didn't appreciate the psychics. I'm gonna say fuck that lady. She's out here just making her own fucking stories and conclusions, and what she did was, I personally believe, harmful and exploitative. So I would like to see her cut out of it, but I'm not a producer on it. Yeah, that was all pretty much for that. I do recommend watching. And then Amazon recommended me, I think it's called Ghost Team. Yeah, Ghost Team Unrated. I also rented that with my Amazon credits. They expire really soon, so I have to spend them anyways. It's a film from 2016. It has John Heater. Is that his name? I always fuck it up. Yeah, John Heater and Justin Long in it, and David Crumlitz. You know that name? It's a really quirky story of these guys that go out to investigate this place, and it turns out that there's not a haunting, there's something else going on, and it's quirky, and like the acting is a little odd in some spots, but overall the writing I think was good, and I think it was worth a watch if you like those kind of cheesy like John Heater films. If we're honest, looking at everything he's done right now, um, I kind of like the quirky films, so I liked it. I would watch it again. That's the dehumidifier again going off. It is very humid here. It makes my heart feel weird. And then the only other thing that I watched this week was I watched the first 6 episodes of Lost, and we are past our time, I guess. I didn't start till like 3:50 or whatever, but I have a lot of thoughts about that, so maybe we will save that for next Monday. We'll do some episodes of that. I didn't expect to have so much to say about the documentary, but once I started writing last night, it's the wrong almond choice. There's so many things wrong with almond joys. Coconut. Ugh. But I guess it's not a mountain, so whatever. Yeah, I didn't expect to have so much to say, but last night when I sat down to rewatch it and like actually analyze what was going on instead of just enjoying it as a viewer, which I did the first time, and I got I got pretty heated, like almost yelling at the screen, being like, "Bring the underground sonar!" uh, Watching it from a more analytical point of view, I do I do see like why they went about things the way that they did. I don't think that it's one of the most haunted places in America. Um, Not that the activity isn't substantial, or I don't know about the evidence because the whole stairs thing makes me feel weird. I don't know. I feel like there's a natural explanation for that someone is just not thinking about, even though they did like what you would assume would be the first steps, like checking the air, checking whether it's level, checking the vibrations. If someone like hits the stairs from underneath, is it going to make the ball like move enough to the point that it rolls down the stairs? We don't know. As opposed to the extraterrestrial explanation, which again we don't know anything about. But we just did get confirmation since this has come out that aliens are real, so I don't know. I think that probably the explanation that offers the most like plausibility in some way is some kind of dimensional physics fuck up. I still haven't figured out what I was watching, that there's this one building. It's not a house. I think it's like a cabin somewhere, and like it's really awkward in the way that it exists. It might have been something that they visited as part of Skinwalker Ranch, that series. I need to dump the dehumidifier. Maybe I'll find it for one of these Media Mondays and we'll look at it. But the house, it doesn't have paranormal activity. It's just like it's a tourist spot, I think now. But it's like the ground is level, but if you stand at like one place, you're taller than if you stand at the other side, like perception wise. And there's like weird things, like something will start swinging, and they think it's like a portal, which I don't know how much to do in the portal, but if the dimension theory or whatever comes through, it might be something like that, in which it just hits a weird point in the dimensions that we're not seeing, that in specifically the 3D, because in the 3D it's level. And You know, it shouldn't have this effect, but it does. So I forget what the thing is called, but maybe we'll review it and I'll find it. I'll go down a rabbit hole or something. But that something like that could be an explanation, because like that nothing has happened in the house since it was built in the 1990s. Alice has been the only owner. She's known what's happened in the house, so there was no murders or anything. The whole murder claim by the psychic was completely unsubstantiated. They have no record of anything like that ever happening. They don't even have record of the male spirit that they see there on the land. There's no record of that. There's some hint that it could be Harry Steen, who was like one of the major names in the founding of this city, because it's like, or this town, because like the river is named Steen after his family and everything. So there's like kind of, maybe it could be this guy, because they got an EVP of like someone saying, "What is your name?" and he says Henry. Maybe it is like an interdimensional portal, and when the guy disappeared, he wasn't killed by Native Americans like they hypothesized in their brains. And he just like fell through the interdimensional portal, and now he's stuck there trying to like communicate with us to get him out by pushing the ball down the stairs and saying Henry, and accurately giving the answers to what cards were being shown in the blind test and everything. What if that's the thing? He just got shoved out of the 3D and we can't see him anymore. That's ridiculous. But more plausible than Ghost, I think. I don't know. I think that was all. Thanks for coming to my peer-reviewed Paranormal Media Monday. Do we have any thoughts on, besides Lost, what we wanted to do next week? Because not every Media Monday is going to be a peer-reviewed Paranormal. It was just because what I found that I wanted to review was Paranormal, so I got to use the title again. And compare it to Sam and Colby, which I think that this documentary is what Sam and Colby thought they did with theirs in proving or whatever and getting evidence and everything. I think this is what they thought they did, but Steve actually achieved it. Steve and the other guy. I don't know who that other producer is. I don't know if he's been a name in Paranormal for a long time or not, because I've never seen it before, but I'm not an expert. I don't know everybody. I just know which ones were popular and stuff when I was into it, when I was younger. I've thought about revisiting Jason Hawes' book, and now that Steve just released a book reviewing that, but my brain's not really at the point yet that I can do reading and stuff. I'm able to start watching movies and TV shows and like analyzing those, but I haven't been able to like sit down and read yet. But maybe when I can, we'll do that and we'll review those. I don't know. If nothing else comes up, we'll review the first season of Lost, because I said last stream that like I thought that I had got halfway through it. No, last night I watched episode 6 of season 1. These are really fucking long seasons. Is it like, was it 24 episodes or something like that? It's like fucking back when Supernatural had ridiculous seasons. When things actually had real seasons. I don't know. I wish I could have like shown some, but I don't want to get copyrighted or anything. So I can just tell you to go watch it now that you know my thoughts on it if you haven't seen it. Interesting for sure. And I'm taking like, as I watched Lost, I was not like remember when we used to like live tweet things when we watched them together? I did that, but like in one of my private discords that I have for my brain. And I just was typing things out and going back and reading it's really funny. Like episode 1 was just like all caps dinosaur. Like where the fuck did that come from? And I'm not believing it's just boars, man. Don't spoil things for me. It's kind of surprising that one of the things that I was able to watch when I was like a teenager or whatever was Ghost Hunters, because I grew up in a really strict house that was like Christian, so I wasn't able to watch a lot of things. I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of things, so I'm going to be watching a lot of things for the first time as we do this. Hopefully. Um, hopefully it won't be just like things that have come out in 2020 and since. I would like to also revisit some of the things that I watched that were part of my 300 movie mono list back when I had mono and I watched all those movies. I would like to go back and look at some of those. And if you guys have any suggestions or anything, um, we can include those. If it gets to be too many suggestions for scheduling or whatever, we'll um, do it as like a channel point redemption or something like that you get to pick this week's thing. Um, but yeah, for now we'll just we'll do next Monday as the first season of The Lost. But I'm gonna get out of here because I have a podcast to work on that I haven't worked on yet. And I'm running over my time, even though I was a little late. It's about balancing out now. Did about 2 hours, which is what I wanted to do. I didn't expect, like I said, I set up 4 things for this week because I didn't think that I would have this much to say about things, but I'm glad that I got fully formed opinions out as we were talking about Bloom's taxonomy. Yeah, I appreciate everybody who came in. I appreciate the raid. Thank you so much. I don't think we did follows or anything this time, but anyone who supports the channel, I appreciate you. Oh, shit. So, if you've been part of the stream and you haven't followed yet, please give us a follow. I stream 3 times a week, or I am striving to. This is my first week doing it. This is my first Media Monday, and I'm actually happy about the way that it came out and the way that I was able to express my opinions. Media Mondays, we'll discuss TV shows, movies, and music if you want to. We can look at an album or a band or whatever. I kind of did it with Panic at the Disco way back, but I would like to revisit that because I have more to say about that. But I was Panic at the Disco. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. That's really hard. But I wanted it to be kind of like a book club where we sit down and pick something to watch and then discuss it the next week. I don't necessarily need it to be all of my opinion the entire time. As this one was, but this one I expected there to be less because it's my first one. It's my first just chatting stream and, you know, since last year, so I didn't expect like a whole lot. So I had a lot to write down. But if we pick something, pick a title for the week, and then come back every Monday and discuss it. And then Wednesday, from it's 3 to 5. I have 5 to 8 written down. It is not 5 to 8. It's Wednesdays 3 to 5:30 or 3 to 6. I play Skyrim. I play modded Skyrim. It is the anniversary edition. I am achievement hunting. Yes, it was Alice. Who I don't know how, but I knew from before, I think through Loopy Spooky. But I'm not positive. Yeah, we are achievement hunting in Skyrim because I always have to achievement hunt. And we're also exploring things that I've never found before, so it's fun. I'm going to set up channel points, hopefully this week, but if not, then next week, where you can use your channel points to pick my weapons, my armor, my followers, things like that. And then Friday, from 5 to 9, every Friday, we do Fallout Friday, in which we talk about the series, which this week would be episode 6, which is kind of what sparked this whole interest in media again. It is modded, and I am still achievement hunting, but at the time, like right now, the mods are kind of fucked up because Fallout dropped an update and like messed everything up. So the achievements aren't necessarily going through, but we are exploring things that we've never seen. I am trying a no factions angered ending, which apparently just like came out as like people didn't know that you could do it, and it was like an article that came on my feed or whatever, which I was already trying to do because the whole Raider thing. Uh, yeah, Lukey. I don't know if he still streams or not, but he's a great dude. Um, but we also have been taking decent care of the settlements, and part of the channel point redemption is dressing the settlers at different places, and we can move them and pick where we want to put them. And with some bits, you might be able to build your own power armor set, or build me a power armor set and add it to my collection. If you haven't seen my collection, I think it was in the last Fallout stream I did, maybe not. Everything that I do, which brings me to the next thing, every stream that I do and video things that I make all go up onto my YouTube channel, Live Phoenix. It has all my old clips and everything that I had to take off of my channel, mostly due to DMCA copyrights. So if you miss a stream and you really want to watch it or something like that, then it'll always be up on YouTube that you can watch at your own convenience. Any other projects or random gaming videos or things that I make will also go there. And then I have a podcast that goes up once a week on Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on how long it takes me to write them, at 11 a.m. Topics are things that I have learned or taught myself throughout my life, and it is called Self-Taught Humanoid Person, which was a quote from my channel. It was like quote 380 or something. It is available on YouTube, but if I get more interest in the podcast itself, because it's not related to gaming or anything, then I am going to move it to its own channel and put it on different platforms that aren't necessarily video platforms. Hopefully it'll go up on Spotify. And then speaking of Spotify, I make at least monthly playlists. They are tools that help regulate like the dopamine in my brain because I struggle with like different addictions. And I use those to help with like cravings and stuff. But I also like love sharing music, and that's why a lot of my clips had to be taken down, is because I used to do like song requests so we could share music. But this is a way that I have found to share music that doesn't violate any guidelines, because I know that you can stream with music and then it doesn't go into the VOD later by setting it as a different source, but it's still against Twitch to do that, so I'm not gonna do that. I don't want to get my channel taken away. So I share music that way. You can follow me on Spotify for the playlist. I have started June's playlist, but I only have a couple songs on there so far. And then, as you saw from the timer that keeps going off, I made a Ko-Fi page. I'm taking down my Etsy page, and I'm doing the Ko-Fi page instead. You can buy emotes. I make emotes. Right now I just have kitty emotes, but the packs are 5, and there's 5 different colors, I think. Black and white, orange, gray, white. I don't know. And if you want customized, I can customize to match your cat for like a couple extra bucks, maybe. And I would like to start doing divination and tarot, so I can list those there too. And I've been working on a Stardew Valley planner ever since 1.6 was announced, because I love that shit. So I like doing that. And then my merch, my t-shirts or whatever, they're currently up on Etsy, but they will be up on Ko-Fi. So you can I think you can just follow without subscribing, and then you could subscribe or donate, whatever. Everything helps, and I appreciate that. and hopefully at some point I'll be able to, like, for subscribers, get like early access to the podcast and things like that. um, I also have a Poshmark page where you can buy the clothes that I've worn in my Instagram, because the pictures going up now are from a couple years ago. Everything that I had ever done got taken down because I struggle with crippling perfectionism. And I thought that none of it was good, so I took them down, and now I am putting them back up. So, clothes that you see in the Instagram pictures and past streams and stuff like that, those are all available on Poshmark, and I do graphic tees for $10 unless you want a bundle, and then we'll do discounts. My socials on Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, all of that is basically just to promote all of this that I just said. So if you want to follow, you can. It's redundancy. If you want to actually message me and talk to me, the best way to do that is Discord. It's just @LivePhoenix. You can add me as a friend. I do not have a Discord server because I can't handle the ones that I am already working as part of. So we'll do that. But what was I gonna say? Oh, if I post anything like recent or whatever, I usually put it on Instagram stories. So there's that if you want to get closer to me and see what I am up to. But otherwise, I don't really update those. They're mostly just like clips and stuff to promote this. So if you're already here, I guess you don't need to be promoted too. I don't know. But I appreciate the fuck out of all of you guys. Thank you so much for all of the support. And I will see you on Wednesday at 3 p.m. with Skyrim.